Bob Litzla. Hello and welcome to the Monday, January 31st, 2011 City Council Informational Meeting. We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start off with a City Council staff report from Deborah A. Owen, City Clerk, Chief of Council Operations. Deborah?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Sioux Falls City Council. Not much to report today, but wanted to encourage you to take a look at the briefing from Municipal League in from the state. There is a number of bills that will be up in the House local government that are really important to us in terms of publishing and election laws. And tomorrow is one at 10 a.m., so I'll give you a report on how that went, but some really important things. So take a look at that newsletter from Yvonne if you could, and let me know what interests you. Thank you.
Any questions for Deborah? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our City Council open discussion. Actually, before we do that, let's do our audit report. Rich is going to give us some updated audit information later in a informational meetings to come. But we did have a 3 audits done during our last audit committee meeting, with a CIP audit, a citywide disbursements audit, and a stimulus funds audit. You know, there's Sue Aguilar and myself, Rex Rolfing, and Jim Intiman are on that audit committee. Do any of you would like to add any comments about that audit committee meeting? I think the citywide disbursements fund audit went very good. The stimulus funds audit went fine. I think the only real issue we might be dealing with is the CIP audit, but Rich will give us a full disclosure, a full presentation to the whole council during an information to come. But we talked a lot about transferring funds within different departments, different projects. Different projects. But any questions about the audit schedule and/or its contents? Okay. Well, very good then. We'll move on to our City Council open discussion. Anybody have anything they'd like to discuss? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right on into our presentations. We're going to start off with our Forward Sioux Falls presentation with Dana Dykehouse. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Chairman Jameson and fellow council members. Thank you for the opportunity. Are we technically up and running yet? We had a little technical difficulty.
If you go into your laptop, this is on the internet. If you go into your laptop, both presentations are on the internet. Yes.
Is this also in here? Or not?
You do have a hard copy in your mailbox if you haven't gotten that yet.
Is it the same presentation?
Yes. There's the case statement, and there's also a house bill.
Okay.
Both are on, if this is it, and I just opened. Same with the second item, which is also.
Dana, if you have any singing or show tunes, something like that you'd like to maybe fill the airways with.
The last time I was here, it was for a presentation for the Events Center 3 task force ago, so I'm glad that's now in someone else's capable hands, and I can just be a supporter from afar. So.
Do we... Dana, do you need the the actual PowerPoint to follow yourself, or can you follow the handout?
No, I can go ahead and follow if you'd like me to begin. I can certainly do that. The package that you have is the case statement. It is not the presentation that we have.
Okay.
So if we could just take a minute or so here, if they're close, I'd like to go through have the presentation in front of you.
You have it on your laptops. Yes. That's it. And the hard copies are there.
All right.
It should look like this.
If all the other counselors are ready, I think we'll do that then. We'll just go ahead and start and
Sure.
follow it till you get up and go, and we'll catch
You bet.
up.
Well, thank you so much for having us here today to talk about Forward Sioux Falls and the 25-year history of this program and what we have planned for 2011 through 2016. Mark Shalanta is acting as co-chair. Mark is in an airplane somewhere over the Midwest attempting to get here. Wasn't able to get back today, but it would be Mark and I will be co-chairing this year. I want to take just a moment and talk about how our community has changed since the first Forward Sioux Falls campaign back in 1987. In 87, the Chamber of Commerce and the Development Foundation began this joint venture. And as you can see on our first slide, we've had some tremendous growth and progress in our community. Sioux Falls' population has more than doubled from 124,000 to 238,000 residents. Our 10 largest employers now and then, I thought you would find this interesting, and this lists who our largest employers were in 1987 and who they are today. And as I visited earlier with our mayor, I want to compliment this council and previous councils. You can see that in 1987, the fifth largest employer in Sioux Falls was the City of Sioux Falls. You now don't even make the list, which means our population has more than doubled, and through efficiencies you have been able to manage that growth without adding to city employees, and I think that's a real feather in the cap of everyone that has managed that process. Our median family income, and that's one of the things that Forward Sioux Falls we have a keen interest in, is increasing that median family income. It's grown from $34,000 to $69,000 over those 25 years. During that same 25-year period, our per capita income in this community has grown from just $13,600 to almost $30,000 as a per capita income. And most important to you, our sales tax revenue has grown from a little over $20 million to $84.7 million last year. Substantial growth, quadrupling in those 25 years the amount of sales tax revenue that we have created. Forward Sioux Falls has always been about building a better community, and the way in which we approach this process is to listen to leaders within our community, various interest groups, to see what areas we can focus on. And we've listed just a few here that past Forward Sioux Falls campaigns have targeted. One is affordable housing, and I know 2 campaigns ago, or 10 years ago, when I first became involved, as we'd go out and talk to business leaders and different groups in Sioux Falls in our community, affordable housing was one of the key targets. We truly needed to develop more affordable housing, and while that's still an issue today, we don't nearly hear that as high a priority because much of that's been addressed. The Sioux Empire Housing Partnership has done a wonderful job of creating affordable housing for all of our citizens. Another priority that we've heard in previous campaigns is the quality of higher education. And with the University Center and the Gear Center, much of that demand is being met now, and we continue to increase that quality of our workforce through higher education. Technology and innovation is something we have focused on in previous campaigns, and that helped birth the South Dakota Technology Incubator, which has spun out a number of fledgling industries that continue to grow within our community. Workforce development efforts have included recruitment, retraining, and training or educating work staff here in Sioux Falls. And finally, quality of life issues have always been part of the Forward Sioux Falls campaign. Two examples of that are the Sioux Falls River Greenway project that Forward Sioux Falls helped in the planning and development of that, and the Blood Run site is something that we are talking about now and have on the planning of that is part of this current Forward Sioux Falls commitment. The next page I asked to have included in there, and that is our mortgage delinquency rate for our community. I know as we talk to many bankers in this community, we have a very strong banking community. We have not had the failures that they have had in banks across the country. One of those primary reasons is that if our citizens have jobs, they pay their bills on time. And even though our unemployment rate has creeped up slightly, it is still dramatically lower than other parts of this country. That equates directly back to the health of our banking system, which in turn equates to the opportunity to make loans to small businesses and continue to grow our economy. So these numbers are important to us, and we'll feel Forward Sioux Falls is a part of making that entire fabric of our community strong. As we look ahead to the next Forward Sioux Falls campaign, what we will be focusing on for 2011 through 2016, there are 6 critical areas that we vetted with the community, with various focus groups and various individuals to see what are important as we look ahead over the next 5 years. Business retention, expansion, and attraction remains very important. Actively recruiting new targeted businesses, not just a broad approach, but more targeted industries that can help our community and proactively facilitate the expansion of existing businesses. Something we had not done before is to look to facilitate the growth of existing businesses to grow our own. We think that is one of the best ways that we can assist is by growing our own, by expanding the number of employees our current businesses have. Quality growth and advocacy work. One of our key goals there is to work to enhance air service to Sioux Falls, and that is a topic on many people's minds as we go out and visit with the community about what their priorities are. Continue to support the Sioux Empire Housing Partnership, the affordable housing initiatives that they have undertaken, and provide leadership in a number of national projects from Eros to Lewis and Clark to the Blood Run project. We feel that Forward Sioux Falls can provide a leadership role there in helping with the planning and development of those various activities. Our third priority is research, technology, and entrepreneurship, and the need to foster research and entrepreneurs and innovators within our community. As we said before, growing our own is some of the best economic development we can have. Businesses that start here, that grow here, and that have investment here tend to stay here and help add to that fabric of our community. To provide startup and second stage capital for emerging high growth companies, often called venture capital or angel capital investors. We as Forward Sioux Falls think we can attract that, and we have dedicated some of the funds that we raise both privately and publicly in assisting with those angel funds and venture capital firms that look to Sioux Falls. And then workforce development, something that we've been at since the start of Forward Sioux Falls, expanding the quality and quantity of our workforce. We think not only more people to work for our businesses, but a more highly educated, focusing on that intellectual capital that's so important to us, and to increase the participation of interns in industry and high school career shadows. I use one quick story. A friend of my sons who came from a small town in Minnesota, now is an engineer with the Poet companies. I asked him one day, did you ever envision that you would be working as a mechanical engineer for an alternative energy company in Sioux Falls? And he says, never in my dreams did I think that's what I could do. He and his wife have purchased a house here in town, are growing. Well, that's just one story of what we want to do in Forward Sioux Falls, is to attract young people that have the skills necessary for the industries of the future. And we think we can do that through opening their eyes to what possibilities are here in Sioux Falls. Our fifth objective is a national marketing and public relations firm strategically positions Sioux Falls on a national level as a high-value location. In the past, we may have focused solely on Minnesota at attracting businesses to cross the state line, but we think we have the opportunity to attract companies throughout the nation to come here. So this Forward Sioux Falls campaign will focus on a much broader scope of strategically asking businesses to come to Sioux Falls through tactical messaging and targeted markets within the entire country. And then finally, a priority of management and communication to ensure that our program has some flexibility to it and that we can communicate our progress to the investors and the community. Our campaign goal in Forward Sioux Falls 5 years ago, our goal was to raise $8.5 million, and with the help of our volunteers, we actually surpassed that significantly to $10.5 million. This time, Forward Sioux Falls' goal is an $11.2 million campaign. We have vetted that with our investors in the past. Most of those investors, if not all, are enthusiastic about our priorities and about reinvesting in Forward Sioux Falls for another 5 years. With that, I would ask your consideration for your continued support. From day one, the City of Sioux Falls has been a partner in each Forward Sioux Falls campaign. In our last campaign, you committed $1 million to us, $250,000 last year, and we are asking now that you would consider a $300,000 per year contribution, investment, if you will, into Forward Sioux Falls. That would be $1.5 million. And we think that from the track record that Forward Sioux Falls has developed, along with the targeted investments that we will be making, there could be no better investment for the City of Sioux Falls than Forward Sioux Falls 2011 through 2016. With that, I will take any questions you may have.
Councilor Brown.
Dana, first of all, thank you for your leadership on this. A couple of things I wanted to ask you about. In number one, the business retention, expansion, and attraction. I'm pleased to see that the emphasis on the expansion there. I think that sometimes it's easy to forget about that.
That's right.
But can you paint us a picture of what types of businesses that we're looking at long term?
Yeah, I think that if there would be one way to explain that, Council Member, it's that for years we were I've used this example that we simply wanted to attract businesses because we were the low wage, low insurance, low land cost. And today we're more of we can attract people because of our intellectual capital. That's really what our strategic advantage is to the workforce. If we can have a quality educated workforce, we can attract people, this community that can put those skills together. We may not have the natural resources in this community that others do, but we do have that intellectual capital, and we can develop that to a fuller extent. I'll use again one example. When Sanford opened their research center, I was talking to a young man from Rochester, New York. He was researching heart disease today at the Sanford facility. And I said, how did a young man and his family from Rochester, New York get to Sioux Falls, South Dakota? And he said, well, it was a job opportunity. I had never heard of South Dakota before, much less Sioux Falls, but it was intrigued by the type of research I could do here. Moved his family here and was enthusiastic. He said, I doubt we'll ever leave because of the quality of life that we have here. So that in particular is the type of jobs that we can grow and I think are important to our community, and all that would spawn with attracting those type of positions.
And that dovetails into my second question in terms of the marketing piece. Given what's going on with state economies across the country right now, I've got to believe the market is ripe for the picking right now. How soon can we begin that effort?
Well, Forward Sioux Falls begins immediately, and we're doing that today. We can do that in two ways. You can do that in a marketing through a broad-based media type of approach, and we will use that. But you can also do that with individual recruitment of businesses or individuals. The state has done that by attracting people back to South Dakota. Our internet site makes that a very easy way in which we can tell the story of Sioux Falls. So I think you'll see a many-faceted approach to that, but they're, again, targeting those industries. I would caution, and I think I speak for our Joint Management Committee when I say to just simply attract someone from Illinois because we have a lower tax base may be a short-term solution. You may attract some jobs, sure, but the minute someone else has a lower cost than what we do, you would lose those. It's what the president of Citibank said on their 25th anniversary always stays with me. We came to South Dakota because you changed your banking laws. We stayed and prospered because of the people here. And I think that's really the difference that we want to make in our community, and we want to sell to anyone outside of this community. It is the people, the productivity, the efficiency, and the intellectual capital that will make a difference in those businesses long term.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Dana, I thank you too. I did spend some time with the case study, and I want you to look at it just a little bit for me. I want you to take it a step farther. Sure. I want to talk about that workforce development piece. Mm-hmm. I mean, the case study is very detailed about where we're headed with that. Right. But if you look at the numbers where we are in terms of education now, the number of people with even college degrees that live in the Sioux Falls metro area, talk about how do we all participate in making that workforce development happen, and what's the plan?
Yep. I think that I don't have that number in front of me, but I know it's around 20.
It's 30% for, no, it's not. It's 20, just 20 plus maybe.
Yes, I was going to say
for
about
a bachelor's degree.
25% with bachelor's degrees or higher. That's about twice what it was 20 years ago. If you've ever read the Dr. Ralph Brown's report on the Tale of Two Cities, the difference between Sioux Falls and Sioux City, where we dramatically passed them in things such as per capita income. If you look backwards in the last 25 years, we have more than doubled our number of people with bachelor's degrees or higher, that intellectual capital I was talking about. We need to take that even further. I think that one of the areas, and just one of those areas that we target, is the university center and the opportunity to complete degrees. The average age of the students at the University Center today is 27 years old. We have to remember that our state universities right now, for incoming freshmen that graduate within a 5-year period, is only slightly above 50%. That means we have many people in South Dakota, many of our workforce. I know we have many that work for us that have a part of their credits toward a degree. But because of whatever circumstances, economic circumstances, family circumstances, they weren't able to complete those degrees. Areas such as the University Center can assist in, when those educational opportunities are out there, they can complete their degrees, go on and advance in their careers, and be part of that makeup of that intellectual capital that we have here. So that's one of the key ways that I would focus in on, that we as Forward Sioux Falls can encourage that.
Good. I think that it sort of fits with what Vernon was talking about in terms of, growing our own is the term you used. Right. If we don't have the educated workforce, you can expand your business all you want, and you aren't necessarily going to be able to do it without the educated folks. So I appreciate, the business community coming into that as well. We're all going to have to work together to make it happen. Thanks.
Councilor Rolfing.
Dana, how is the business community, and how can we as city government help that situation? This is shocking to me. 50% of people going to state, the U, and the mines, whatever, graduate. They don't get their degree. And we've got
slightly above that. I don't want to get in trouble with my university president friends. It's slightly above 50%.
I was going to throw something in about Augie in that, but I won't do that. But anyway, it really is shocking, and gives us a perfect opportunity here to use the university center to grow that, right, and let people get their degrees, finish their degrees out there. The people who haven't. And how can we do that? What's the plan to get the employers to help those people do that?
Well, the employers are obviously employers when they understand they benefit from that educated workforce.
That's right.
and advanced degrees. There are numerous businesses across Sioux Falls that offer tuition assistance, that work in partnership, that have internships, that have, I know in our own business, so we work closely with both Southeast Votech and the University Center on internships and scholarships and areas like that. And so that's, I think there are opportunities like that to encourage that. Our interns, and while the interns are the first introduction that they have, once they get to see what those positions are in the future and what education level they need to achieve those their goals, that will be a big plus. And that's part of our workforce and the quality workforce that we want to focus on with Forward Sioux Falls.
Do we have, and I think I know the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Do we have the type of workforce that we need for the type of industry that we have potentially in this community? Growing.
It could always be better. And what type of workforce do you want? I think that if you look back at the previous Forward Sioux Falls campaigns, one of our focus has been to increase that per capita income, increase that median income. You do that by attracting the industries that pay a higher wage, that have a higher investment in what they do. And again, I used my example of that young man from Rochester, New York. To me, those are the type of jobs that we want to attract to this community. Those type of, and that will spawn other type of similar type of activities.
Okay.
Any other questions? I might have one.
Yes.
On the number 2 of your critical areas that you're going to address of the region, the quality, enhance air service at the Sioux Falls Airport.
Yes.
What do you envision your contribution to be, or how would you envision helping change that?
Yes, that's from our perspective, that's still in the formative stage. We have dedicated some specific dollars and have agreed to begin a task force that will look into that as to what options are available. And so not knowing exactly what the right direction would be, I think it would be premature for me to say this is specifically what we're going to do. But I can assure you that as we've been out visiting with business owners and business leaders throughout the community, it is one of the priorities. They want to look at potential solutions to that issue. But they also know they don't want us to simply throw dollars at it. They want to make certain that it is an answer that will work for the long term for Sioux Falls. And I think we all know that for the long term of Sioux Falls, the best thing that we can do in air service is increase the demand. If we have more and more business travelers due to more and more businesses, then air carriers will, the marketplace will dictate that more demand requires more service. So still in the formative stages, but we know it's a priority, and we have set dollars aside and established that task force to look into it.
Councilor Brown.
So, Dana, it's similar to those businesses. The airlines are, in the sense that you want some that are going to have loyalty to Sioux Falls.
That's right.
The only other thing that I would add to that conversation is it doesn't excite me to pour a lot of tax dollars into the airport. They have a source of revenue out there and significant money in the bank. So I personally don't like the idea of city taxpayer dollars going into the airport, because they do have a source of revenue to attract airlines there.
So, again, that's probably a debate beyond what my scope is today, but we do have again, Forward Sioux Falls does think we can play a role in providing resources to evaluate the alternatives, and definitely want to encourage the evaluation to find a solution for that issue facing our community. If I could add, I want to add one more thing to Council Member Roethling's thought. It's about growing our own. Let me use one example. My good friend Carl Rapp from ADP, the large plant that made the significant investment. If you look at ADP in that business, that is truly a significant investment in our community, provides some terrific jobs. Carl and his original staff at ADP all came from Citibank. They were all people that worked on the mainframe computers at Citibank, and because we had that resource of knowledge here in Sioux Falls, that trained workforce, when ADP was looking for a site, they need the human element to also make that happen. So because of having Citibank here and had that trained workforce, they were able to spin off and help us attract ADP. And so that's just how one more way that we can grow our own, by having that workforce that may not work in an identical industry, but has a transferable skills that help us grow those businesses when they do choose to come here.
I did hear that story as well from, I think, somebody at the Development Foundation, and just a great example of how you guys all work together and get things done, and just an exciting. I would say that if I could, just that I think the leadership that's been provided over the years has been very, very well done, and I can't speak for the city, but I would suspect that continued funding would occur. But any other questions? Very good, Dana. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, next we're going to start with the comprehensive wastewater regionalization study. Mark Cotter is here. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman Jameson, City Council. We'll get booted up here, but just to give a short introduction to the team that's here. Today we'll start the first of 3 days worth of meetings on this comprehensive wastewater study. As we all know, this was really precipitated out of the contract that we negotiated with Harrisburg in late 2009. And one of the things that was important to us is that we would bring in people that we initially looked at the model up in Met Council to see if that had any framework that could work for the City of Sioux Falls. In those discussions, we found our way to these two national experts that you'll see today, Tom Gould, the National Director of Finance and Rates, and the first speaker, which will be John Maxwell. He's the National Director of Integrated Planning. Tomorrow we will be meeting with the communities that the map that's in the upper right-hand corner, that's Sioux Falls, and then that outside perimeter, that's that 10-mile distance within Sioux Falls. There's been 2 additional communities outside of that that have asked to also be included that were not in the original list. Canton, which is outside, but they at least want to have it as an option for them as their city grows. One of the key things that we always do when we expand or update a piece of equipment at the wastewater plant, we write a facility plan, we submit it to the DNR. They do the same function, and this would allow them to include Sioux Falls financing rates and governance in those alternatives that they would submit if they asked to be a part of it. Tomorrow, again, we'll meet with the communities. We'll give them a very similar presentation, answer their questions, and then on Wednesday there'll be an IRAB meeting with these 2 gentlemen. So we're trying to maximize their time while they're in town. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate. We also have Dan Graber. You've met Dan. He's with HDR, and he is the lead designer on the Central Main project. So he's very connected to the wastewater system of Sioux Falls, and also Mark Perry, principal engineer of wastewater for the City of Sioux Falls. Trent Lubers was not able to be here, but he's also had a key role in this project. So with that, I think the 2 things that we set out to answer is, so we did not have another situation like Harrisburg come up where it came up, their growth really took off, and they needed to know what Plan B was. And so our approach initially was, let's look out within 10 miles of Sioux Falls, that's where the majority of the growth is happening, and see if there's any additional communities that would want to be included in a study. And at this point, they've all said, yes, we'd like to be at the table as a part of the discussion. Many of them believe that their current wastewater lagoons have the capacity for their near term, at least potentially long term if regulations don't change against their current treatment practice. And then last, if they did come to the City of Sioux Falls, what would be their financial rate and governance policies that they would have to consider to connect to the Sioux Falls system. So those are our two questions that we've really tried to answer. Chairman.
Mark, if I could, I just want to ask the rest of the council if everybody's familiar with what happened with Harrisburg and that whole issue. I know you guys were here pretty much all the time anyway, but Councilor Rolfing, maybe just a quick tune-up, Mark, if you could, just the basics of what we learned and what happened with Harrisburg, just to help us come along.
Certainly. Just for some history, the City of Sioux Falls has been treating the Renner Sanitary Sewer District wastewater since the 1970s. There's another area out by 41st Street and TLS Road called Prairie Meadows. We've been treating their wastewater. They're a rural subdivision, been treating their wastewater since the 1970s. We currently are treating the City of Brandon's wastewater, a portion of it. They do have lagoons. They are able to discharge to the river, but they also do send us a portion of their wastewater. And then we got to a point with Harrisburg that they had some long-range projections, and I think we all have seen what Harrisburg's growth has done, and they expected their lagoons to last much longer than they did. They essentially filled up. They do not have what they call a discharge permit, and so they're essentially evaporation lagoons. So when their wastewater lagoons fill up, they've got to wait for Mother Nature to take that water off or ask for a special discharge permit to discharge into 9 Mile Creek. Well, long term, you can't have a solution of special discharges. So initially, they did write a facility plan that looked at coming to Sioux Falls and also building their own treatment plant and or expanding their lagoons. And after many discussions with the city and a DNR, the best alternative was to come to the City of Sioux Falls. So we took an approach that was very similar with the other contracts that we had with other communities. And I think what we ultimately lacked was looking at all the details on how these communities, what risks that they have, what risks we have, and just really good, clear, forward-thinking financial rate-setting policies that we really need to consider as we either accept another community's wastewater, because the reality is that you have a plant and it has a fixed volume of capacity. And so you have to look at the citizens of Sioux Falls over time have built that plant. They've invested into the wastewater. And so we certainly recognize as we got further into it, started to hear public comment, heard comment from IRAB and also comment from the City Council that we just lacked a good forward-thinking piece, and that's why we've commissioned these two gentlemen that have worked with communities across the country in some very, what I would consider, complex regional solutions, and we've just brought all that expertise to you today. So you'll hear that really in two pieces. What is the governance, and then what are the financial rate-setting policies that we should consider? So does that recap it?
Thank you.
All right. Well, to start out, let's start with John Maxwell. Again, he's the National Director of Integrated Planning, and he'll take you through the first slides.
Well, that pretty well sums it up. Anybody have any questions for me? Mark did a good job on that, I thought. And Dan's graciously agreed to be my Vanna White here as we go through some slides. But let me kind of, before we go right into all the slides, put a little bit of context to add to what Mark has mentioned. There's been a good dialogue over the last year with the regional purveyor groups, with the development community, with staff. Been a lot of concepts batted around back and forth. I guess our bottom line observation is there is a lot of interest by communities and purveyors within the area for some synergism and for some help and some dialogue, not necessarily as the door been knocked down with people who want to come and sign up and hook up immediately, to your city system. But there is that potential in the future. There is some interest. We heard a really good presentation about the growth potential for Sioux Falls. And so, what we need to do is be thinking about an orderly way, a consistent way to plan for the expansion of these utilities to make that growth happen. And that's been much of what we've been, looking at here. So in the next few weeks, you all will begin to have some of these policies come back in front of you to make the tough decisions about what you want to do and how you see this community being supported particularly for wastewater service over the next 25 years. Usually your eyes glaze over when I stand up here and talk about wastewater service, and it's so inspiring, but it is a really big deal when you are looking at the growth potential that you have here to make sure that your infrastructure is capable of handling that. So these kinds of policies, both in terms of service and financial considerations and rate making, are what we've been evaluating here for the last several months, and are going to begin bringing those to you for some conversation and decisions. Don't really have any bottom line recommendations here today at all, just more of an informational briefing to let you know what we've been looking at and how we think you can structure this. So in the slides that are going to follow, there are several policies and a lot of lines, and you can go home and read all of those, but I would like to kind of give you the bottom line first, and then we'll come back. And then I can talk to you about some of the structure of these policies. And then Tom Gould, who's our National Finance Director and rate, lead for our company, is going to talk with you a little bit about how to mechanically work through and arithmetically work through these rates in a fair and equitable way. Fair to the City of Sioux Falls, as well as fair to your regional customers. So from my point of view, I think the real advantages, that we've seen here in the draft structure that we put together are fundamentally built on the fact that you all are offering to do this. You're not holding a gun to anyone's head. This is a voluntary process. If people need assistance, you're there as a resource. There have not been any unreasonable requests made from the City of Sioux Falls as a condition of service. You've been there as a good neighbor, and you've been there to help your neighbors, and I think I've heard that in your meetings, and I think that's commendable. We work in a lot of areas around the nation, and that's not always the case. So that's a very positive thing. I think the other positive thing is that, with that kind of trust level already developed, it's important to have some written documentation, some written policies, both of your services that you provide for wastewater as well as your financial methodologies. So everyone knows this is kind of the way we do it. We don't make it up every other day. It's not, some new policy that we put in place. They're documented and they're a matter of record. And so that's where we're headed with this, is to provide you those recommendations so that you eventually can get to where you adopt those. The other benefits are, that they are clear, they are consistent, they are sustainable, and therefore your regional customers, have that confidence that they know how business is conducted, here at the city. Frequently, when we work on regional studies like this, a big issue for folks are, well, how do you do it? And so we are preparing a financial policy manual. Tom is working on that with kind of a step-by-step cookbook on how to calculate these rates. Your staff, outside folks can look at those. It's just the way that rates are calculated. It follows the standard principles and procedures that both the water and the wastewater industries in the U.S. adhere to. Tom and I are both instructors for AWWA and WEF on water and wastewater rate making. So there's been manuals written, it's very consistent. So we're moving to that platform. Another big benefit, two more benefits, I think, and then I'll get on to some of the particulars, are in this process, what we are coming back with and hearing from folks is they want to hear more. They want to be involved more. I'm talking about your regional customers, if you will. So providing a briefing, an informational forum, if you will, between the city and regional customers, we think is a very positive, easy, and appropriate thing to do. So maybe there's a meeting annually or twice a year or as needed or whatever to kind of brief them on your budgeting process and your rate-making process. Before you adopt a rate change or a change in your connection charges, just to provide a briefing to the regional customers and explain what's driving it and how you're doing it and what the impact is. You all get to set those policies, but it is an informational courtesy, if you will, or an important piece of information to pass along. And also to be able to have some consistency in that. So, this annual or twice a year program for this informational forum, we think would be a healthy addition. So with that said, what we want to talk about here real quickly is a little bit on our study, the governance aspects, the policies that we've come up with, and an overview of the technical rate analysis. Everything at this point is a draft. Nothing has been completed. So next slide. A lot of objectives. Actually, Mark has hit on most of these. It does all come back to the Harrisburg example. You already know you're in the business right now, so I don't really need to dwell on this much more, but it was a motivator. It was to say, we know growth is coming. Regional utilities can be in any form, but let's have a set methodology that we can follow. Next one. So under governance, there are so many ways to define a regional system. And as Mark mentioned, we have worked from the Ozarks to the Seattle area, to Las Vegas, to Orange County, New York, to a number of other areas, even Gillette, further west of here, on regionalization. In some places, regionalization means formation of a new regional government or an entity to run the utility. In other places, it can be a combination of existing governments that get together through memorandums of understanding. In other examples, more like here, the ownership and the operational responsibility stays with the largest city, who has the bonding capacity and the staffing responsibility. And then through wholesale agreements or regional contracts, those services are provided in a clear-cut manner. That's more the orientation that we feel is appropriate. That seems to be the consistency that the communities are looking for. In the analysis that we were talking about earlier of doing a 25-year forecast of wastewater requirements and growth, in 25 years, the average daily demand on your wastewater system is basically going to more than double by a little bit. But of that, the regional flows are only about 10 to 20% of that. So it's not the largest consideration, but a very important consideration in terms of how to structure this. So we have put together a draft policy and provided it to staff that talks a little bit about the governance. Actually, if you go back to the one before that, one more. So there's 9 sections to this policy. You all will see that here in the next few weeks. Some of these are more interesting than others for sections. I'll only hit on a couple of them, I think, and then we'll talk a little bit further about the financial pieces to it. Let's go on down to, this one is important to know. The policy would specify the city owns and operates and maintains your own system that provides regional support for your participating agencies. Next section. Obviously, there's a lot of text to this, but we're just giving you the highlights. I think the key here is that once these agreements are signed, either party could give a 1-year notice, and then there has to be service that's continuing during that 1 year as Plan B is developed, so no one's left high and dry. This is basically just verifying that we will develop a regional map. Actually, there is a regional map here that identifies all these regional wastewater system service facilities. Wait, back up one more. And also that there's a database of assets that's been developed. Both the map and the database has been developed, and we're working with that right now on doing some of the rate computations. So that's already in place. Let's go to the next one. The responsibilities of the city and your participating agencies are laid out in this policy. Basically, I think the first bullet's the most important one, that the city would make daily and strategic decisions in the best interest of all customers, including the regional wastewater customers. Okay? Let's go to the next one. That the city would provide informational meetings, that you all would be briefing these wastewater customers on budgets and rate making before adoption by the city council. And any changes in technical requirements or treatment requirements that would impact, the overall budget or rate making would be discussed, so everyone can kind of see it coming, if you will. Next section. Any adjustments or amendments obviously come through you all. That to become a regional or a wholesale customer, that requires a direct connection to your system. We did evaluate the city getting involved in a satellite management role or contract operations or other considerations like that. Didn't really get a lot of nibbles on that, frankly. However, to make a direct connection as a regional customer, that's a valid criteria. And also the city has indicated that they would provide advisory assistance upon request. So sometimes folks need to pick up the phone and call someone who has more certified operators or more sophisticated treatment and then get a tutorial, if you will, and that's more or less what we're talking about. Let's go to the next one. I also think it's important that you all have wastewater service agreements between, all your customers that you serve. You have that now already with Harrisburg and Renner and some of the others. Any new account that comes on board, develop the same agreement format, be consistent with it, make sure everyone has everything laid out in that agreement, including dispute resolution procedures. So when they sign, they know how much it's going to cost, how much capacity they can receive, and how business gets conducted. Next section. In regard to financing extensions of the wastewater system, from the point of connection back to the customer, and within that regional city, all those cost responsibilities are borne by that regional customer. Anything from the connection through your treatment plant, that's the basis for the rate making, and that is the cities of which you can allocate to your wholesale customers. Next slide. There's a whole long list of financial policies which will be developed as Exhibit C. I'll show you a table of contents of that in a minute, but those cover a wide variety of things from budgeting to reserve accounts to rate-making principles to debt service coverage, you name it. And the last bullet there was, Dan is so quick on this. He's already heard me talk before. He wants to get this over with. But this last bullet about rate making is every 5 years our recommendation is that the city should engage in a cost of service or a rate making exercise. Things change. Sometimes they change quickly. But within 5 years, a lot can change. Most generally, we find that that's the longest time frame to go without looking at a more detailed master planning and rate study update. Next bullet. The city is responsible for maintaining regulatory compliance, including industrial pretreatment. Everybody else has to honor that and be a good customer. These concepts in terms of governance are all drafted up in a policy, which I haven't found a policy in your codes yet, so this would be a suggested addition, to city code. So that will be coming to you here in the next few weeks. Staff's already got it for review. Okay? Let me stop right there. There's about 3 sections to this, so any questions up to this point in time? Everyone's senses have totally dulled at this point? Okay, that's fine. We've got an option for questions later on. The whole principles of regional service, however, follow your plan. You've got a 2035 sanitary sewer plan that's been put together, and you've got really good planning documentation. I'm not just pandering here, but we work all over the country, and I would say that the way that Sioux Falls has addressed a logical extension of your boundaries, where you're going to be providing utility services, is far superior to most that we work with, because the development community and your staff and your budget folks can all see where you're going to be next year, in 5 years, in 10 years. And rarely do we work with a city who has that kind of vision and has it documented. So hats off to you guys for that, for sure. Next one. This is a slide that we've used to try to explain the concept to the regional customers around here. And the notion is that any kind of regionalization is really an exercise in trade-offs. And this grid here shows you that if folks wanted to stay all by themselves and independent and separate, in the lower quadrant, the lower left quadrant, that's what you would get. And if that, you would have local control, but you'd also have the highest risk because you're out there all by yourself. And you have the lowest financial opportunities because there's no way to spread it across a broader rate base. On the upper right-hand corner, in any kind of a partnership, you're going to have to give up a little bit of control. But for that, you'll have the ability to spread costs, lower your unit costs and lower your risk. Under all of these, our philosophy is to use this cost of service concept for developing rates. So that resonated with everyone when we spoke with them. They kind of began to get it, like, okay, we can't really have our cake and eat it too. Sometimes we've got to compromise on things. Next slide, Dan. These principles, the next 4 or 5 pages, are really pretty boring, frankly, but they just get to the point that certain principles are non-negotiable. Ownership, operation responsibilities. You've got to decide where you want to be and then make it clear. Next slide. I've already pretty well hit on this, I think, of what the responsibilities of the city might be. Let's go to the next one, please. We've talked to folks about This capacity reservation concept, the jury's still out on it. We haven't made up our mind. We haven't gotten full feedback yet. But the notion here was, should folks come forward and say, in 25 years, we're going to need another 1 million gallons a day. So we're going to sign on the dotted line and make a commitment and reserve that capacity, and you all plan around it. Have it there for us when we need it. And for that benefit, we'll pay you a check up front, or we'll pay it to you in increments. That's one concept. The other concept is, as each of these regional cities or communities grow, they kind of grow into themselves. And every time there's another batch of 1 or 10 or 100 new connections, you'll get a check for that. You'll be responsible for trying to stay on target. We'll have our planning horizon figured out, and there will be no need to reserve capacity, quote unquote, rather just to pay up when that time occurs. More like a pay-as-you-go concept, if you will. So we're still working, on that recommendation. Don't have that figured out just yet. Next slide. These are the financial rate-setting policies. I've got a list of the table of contents. Let me come back to that in the next slide after the next one. The system development charges is a way of getting capacity purchased in your system by new growth. Within your city limits, from the new development, could be in single lots or big subdivisions. On the outside of your system, it comes through the community. They have their own land use and planning policies. In all of those cases, however, we're looking at using something where the payment is based upon actual use or projected use. We think there's some advantages both to the city and to the development community for maybe changing the structure of these system development charges a little bit. In the philosophy we're thinking about here, it wouldn't require that there be a big check written on day one. It would be more written as each connection is made. So there would be a need to expand the system in a logical manner, but that seems to work from a cash flow point of view, and it could also work well for the development community to help stimulate growth, which is what we were just hearing about here in the prior conversation. Both the developer and the regional customers, however, can pass those connection charges along to the individual homeowners when they get their building permits. So that is traditionally the way it's done in most of the other communities that we work in. Next slide. The second and third bullets about city is responsible for all decisions and is the sole authority for the regional wastewater system to issue debt and establish regional rates, fees, and charges. You guys are on the hook for selling debt and making the payments, so you should be in charge of making that final decision for the regional rates. Within the community, once you pass that rate along to a regional outlying community, they add on top of that their internal costs. So they are also responsible for their own local rates and charges, which get appended and added on to whatever the wholesale charges are that you all will be calculating. Next slide. This is a laundry list of the financial policies which we are working on right now. Some are related to the rate setting process. Some are more related to the operating and capital policies and planning. This is a very tidy list. Ones that we recommend, ones that we work with, with utilities throughout the country. And the point of all this is that really, you guys are like the board of directors for a big business. It's not just a utility, you're running a business. A utility is a business and needs to be addressed in a financially prudent way. These are the business-like principles, for financing that we adhere to or that we recommend and are generally accepted in the water and the wastewater industry. No details on those tonight, but we're coming back with those. Let's have the next slide. And I think I'd like to close just before I turn over to Tom, who's going to come up and talk about some of the financial principles of defining the regional system. Is that what you're on the cusp of here, I think, is really very good. You've run a great utility, you provide a great service. It's all gotten taken care of, but it's not all been fully transparent and documented to the outside world. And I think that's important to the outside world as well as to the inside staff, so that it's really clear what you all want them to do and what your expectations of them as well as these regional wastewater customers may be. So that's where we're headed. A lot of policy jargon, but that's why you get paid the big bucks. We're going to be coming back here in a few weeks and giving you something to chew on. Before Tom gets up here, do you have any questions for myself?
Any questions, Councilor Herpenbach?
A couple questions. We're not talking at all about any sort of regional wastewater authority.
We are not.
We become that authority for the regional wastewater system.
Correct.
So then, do we have any examples? I mean, some of us kind of watch extra regional communities, what's going on here, but I'm not sure I could name an example right now where Sioux Falls is involved in a regional situation like this. Can you give us some examples of not necessarily us, but other places that are working this way?
Well, let me just pause there for a minute. I think actually in solid waste, you have a regional relationship with your outlying communities for solid waste.
Right, and I wanted Mark to talk about that just a little bit too. Yeah.
Before Mark comes up here, there are some other communities that work at a regional level. Up in Minneapolis, that's one area for sure. In the metropolitan Seattle, King County area, there are regional governments that operate. In the Los Angeles and Southern California area, there are, are some metropolitan water and wastewater providers. But in a community of this size, I always take the position of saying, do you really need another layer of government? What does that accomplish? And can't you do that with just good understanding and agreements? And that's what's led us to what you're going to be hearing over the next few weeks, is that kind of a philosophy as opposed to creating another entity, if you will. So did that answer part of it?
Absolutely. And I think, we look to, come ahead, Mark, and answer that, but I think we look to our neighbors to the east. There are smaller counties in Minnesota that are doing regional work on a pretty large scale for that type of community, not just in wastewater, but in other areas. But talk about the landfill and just make it an example in this, Mark, if you would.
Certainly. The landfill right now serves a 5-county area, and it was years ago that the DENR recognized that to have good solid waste practices, to stop all these small landfills being either created or having to be maintained by small municipalities, they started to draw boundaries and say, we want this 5-county area to go to this landfill. And so that's our 5-county regional landfill. The City of Sioux Falls does own it, and it operates it, much like we're talking here. And I think one of the keys that was brought to us for our first decision is just based on the size and scope of the City of Sioux Falls, and not only our current wastewater flow, but what it will be at 2035, then what will be the increment of flow that will come from these if all 12 communities at that point were to be connected, and it's still small. And so that at that point, we also look at large wastewater users in the City of Sioux Falls, like Morels and those kinds of contracts that we currently have, and say, I think if we can just provide some good, fair and guidance on rate setting and governance, let's build on what we've done with the landfill. The other piece, too, is that Siouxland Libraries is another regional aspect that exists here. And I think on the water side, we've certainly sold water to Lincoln County for a number of years. And so it's certainly in the industry, people like to harness that water and wastewater utilities are extremely expensive to own and operate. And so if you can do the economy of scale and build one plant as opposed to a separate plant for all these communities, it's good for everybody.
I think that's right, and that's why I wanted you to talk about it, is it makes it easier for us as citizens to understand if we can say, oh, we're not making a new wheel here. We are
Right.
just kind of replicating things we've done before. We've survived this process before. This is a great idea. Let's move forward with it. So thank you.
Very good.
Councilor Aguilar.
Mark, how long have we been providing this service to some of the outlying communities? And did they come to us initially, or did we go to them?
I may have to ask Mark Perry on the history, but the Prairie Meadows, which is on the west side of Sioux Falls, that's been since the 1970s. Runner has been since the 1970s. And one of the key pieces with Renner is that community sits right over the aquifer that the City of Sioux Falls and these draws out of. So there was a project back in the 70s to eliminate all those septic tanks and put in a collection system and then pump their wastewater to Sioux Falls, better for the groundwater, and just a more updated wastewater system. Now, Brandon, I believe that was in the early to mid-'80s. I'll check with Mark. Is that okay? So, Brandon, we've been treating their wastewater since the mid-'80s, and when we engaged all these communities on a one-on-one basis, and then we've been doing larger meetings with them. You know, there's communities around us, and Harrisburg's not the only community that's growing. Brandon's also got some very strong growth needs, and they also want to make sure that they're paying their fair share. They've voiced that, and so this will be a good, fair system to go forward with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Rolfing.
Mark, how big can our plant grow? Is there any problem that you see that down the line that we could be overtaxing that facility?
Well, that's why we bring in experts like Dan. But I would say too, it's a product of several things. It's how far do we want to pump wastewater. That's why on the east side of Sioux Falls, we're planning a second plant because it just functionally works better. We've taken all this land and set a large lift station out by the river and 57th Street. And we're, instead of having to pump all that wastewater long-term back to the plant, it's much simpler now to develop a smaller package plant that even has better technology and has much cleaner water that comes out of it. So that's one sense of how far do you want to pump it, those kind of factors. And also I think we're going to have challenges as our city, once our easterly growth area is full, which will be many years. We probably have a 20 to 25 year growth of sewer to the east. If we start to then go back to the west, we'll either have to make the decision to pump north and then east to the existing plant, or again build a plant on the east side of town. So there's a lot of factors. You start to look at conveyance. You have to look at, do I have a stream that has enough base flow that I could actually put a wastewater flow in every day? So there's a lot of those kind of factors.
Councilor Brown.
Another good example is in public safety, the 911 centers. Although we haven't done a great job in South Dakota, that Minnesota's been much better about regionalizing those, and South Dakota has a goal to do that. So lots of examples of it.
Well, then let me introduce Tom Gould here. Tom's our National Director for Rates and Financing within HDR, and I'm going to brag on Tom just for a minute because he won't. But this past year, we worked in Gillette, Wyoming on a regional water system. It's a $320 million project bringing water into the community. And they came to us in the fall and said, well, we need to get a memorandum of understanding and this governance taken care of and rates figured out. And we've got to go to the legislature now, this month, actually, to get the funding. And in order to do that, we have to show that we're on the same page. And prior to that, every time we'd schedule a meeting, it would actually be a fist fight with a meeting that would break out. It was really a challenging, acrimonious, situation between the city, the county, and about 32 systems. But the way we approached it, was to start with the equity of designing the rates, to show that there is a methodology, that there is a fair and consistent way to calculate those rates so that people didn't have to worry about, improprieties or concerns or whatever about the calculation. And Tom did that, and he did it in a month and a half. And then once we got through that, I could come in and look like a hero because everyone signed the governance part of it. So it was simple. So some of those same principles, however, also relate here to wastewater, and that's what Tom's going to talk a little bit about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So what I want to talk about is defining the regional system, and there's a couple of important reasons why we need to do that. One is, as the system grows and new customers connect to the system, we have to decide what is the regional facilities that they benefit from. So we've been going through this process of trying to define what the regional facilities will be. And again, regional system is defined as the assets or the facilities that will be considered a part of providing service to those regional customers. And the reason why that's important is because what we want to do is earn a fair return on our investment to serve those regional customers. And that's a basic concept that comes out of those financial policies. Now, when I talk about regional customers, that includes both in-city customers and the out-of-city customers, because we all benefit from those specific facilities. So we'll develop a rate methodology that allocates the cost to the regional system, and then there's a local system cost, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. So what we've been going through, actually Dan and Mark Perry have been doing a lot of this work, is we've reviewed the various customers and the facilities, and we've defined essentially those facilities that we need to do this. And the regional facilities are really two major components. There's the treatment facilities, which everybody kind of understands that part, but then we have the interceptors and pump stations that need to bring the wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant. And that's the challenging part, is what are those pipelines that we need to get the wastewater to the treatment facility. So one of the key concepts that comes out of this regional process is how far is the city willing to extend facilities to connect a new customer. So if somebody is right at 10 miles out on the border, would the city be willing to extend facilities out? And what we've said is no. In essence, what we're going to do is define the regional facilities, and if a customer wants to connect to the system, then they'll have to make the investment to make that connection to the regional facility. And that's a pretty basic concept, that we're not going to extend services out and just willy-nilly make investments, that it has to be a joint partnership. We'll have the regional facilities, you make the investment to connect. And if you make that investment to connect, you own those facilities and you'll maintain those facilities up to the point of the connection to the regional facilities. So again, that's a very basic concept. This is actually a very hard thing to see, but it is the definition of the regional facilities. And we've taken a look at the regional facilities from three perspectives. One is the existing facilities that are in place today that can serve the regional customers. The second part is near-term investments that we're thinking about, future investments, and then there's the long-term investments, and we've described those in different ways. But the purpose here is not to get down and look at all the lines, but necessarily to say it's necessary to say that we have defined those facilities. We've actually gone back through the asset records, and we have when the facilities were installed, what the original cost was, and so on and so forth. So this is a huge step in terms of this study, is to have all these facilities defined. We haven't discussed these yet with all the regional customers, but again, an important part of this is it has the facilities that we can serve those outside city customers with. As I mentioned, one of the key tasks that we've just recently completed is to go through all the asset records and to pull out what those regional facilities are. Because again, a key part of this methodology will be earning a fair return on our investment to serve those customers. So as improvements are made to the regional system, we'll earn a return on our investment in those facilities, earn the depreciation expense and so forth. The challenge has been separating all these asset items out. Your asset records are great, but it doesn't necessarily say that this segment from point A to point B is exactly this cost. You have to sort of dig through all your work order records and all sorts of things to be able to dig that out easily, and so that's why it's taken a little bit of time. And so now that we know what the regional system is defined as, going forward, it will be easy to keep track of the asset records and define what's regional and non-regional. So once we had that pulled out, the process of developing the rates is fairly straightforward. The first step, and before I go through these steps, I wanted to mention that we are talking about a rate methodology, and that doesn't mean that you haven't looked at rates in the past in a fair and equitable way. What this really means is that as you start adding customers, particularly regional customers, the world gets more complex. And so what we need to do is think about a methodology that will treat customers fairly as we go forward and as we add new customers to the system. So I don't want to have the impression that everything that the city has done in the past has been wrong or incorrect. What we want to do is make sure that we have a methodology going forward that will be fair and equitable to the customers that connect to the system and the existing customers in city and the existing wholesale customers. So the first step of this process is to develop what we call the revenue requirement. And this, in essence, a revenue requirement is the amount of funds that are needed to properly operate the utility. So we look at the expenses associated with the utility, and it includes both operating costs and capital costs. And then once we get to that point, what we do is we divide those costs between what's needed to serve the regional facilities versus the in-city local facilities. So as an example, maintenance of the collection system here in town is basically a local cost. The treatment plant costs are a regional cost. So that's the process of sort of going through our O&M and our capital expenditures and making sure that we can split those between what's local versus regional. And once we have that regional revenue requirement, then we go through the process of allocating to the regional customers. And as has been mentioned, there's the potential of 12 or 13 regional customers. And at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to allocate costs to all the regional customers to take a look and see if it makes sense to have a single regional rate or to have a different rate for different customers, because there are some unique characteristics and issues with certain customers, and we just want to make sure that we're treating folks fairly. And then once we have the allocated costs, it comes down to simply developing the rates. We know how much money we need to collect. We know what their volume usage is. It's pretty straightforward at that point. So that's step 4. If you love diagrams, this is sort of the diagram of what I just previously showed you, which is as you go into step 1, there's really 3 basic inputs into that step 1, which is we take your utility budget, we take those financial policies that John previously talked about, and the utility capital plan. We develop a total system revenue requirement for your system. Compares the total revenues to the total expenses. And then at that point, we split between what's regional and what's local. And again, as we mentioned, the local piece stays with the city in terms of how they establish the local rates. But the regional piece is what we allocate out, and I've just used customer A, B, C, and D, but they will be allocated out to the various customers on your system, and then finally we'll come up with some rates. And again, we could have individual rates for individual customers, or we could have a single regional rate. That's to be determined in the study. So, that's basically where we're at today. We are reviewing this process. We're in the process of starting to develop the cost model to do all this, and so the next time we come back, we'll probably talk to you about the actual rates in process. So the next steps that we've got, and I don't know if Mark or John wants to do this, but I can do it. Again, we need to develop that financial methodology, and I have a paper I'm going to give the staff tomorrow on that, and the computer model. We also need to develop these regional system development charges. John talked about those. And what they are is it's essentially a form of a buy-in. So one of the issues that you had with Harrisburg was, we have a certain amount of treatment capacity. So the question is, we haven't reserved that capacity, but we have available capacity. Should the existing customers be reimbursed for the value of that capacity when somebody comes along and wants 1 million gallons a day of capacity? And in the past, that hasn't been happening. And so what we, again, want to do is develop system development charges that will take into account the amount of capacity that you're buying into and reimburse the existing customers for the investment that they've made in that capacity. And we'll go through and talk about that with you at probably the next meeting. And then we are continuing to communicate again with the local communities and with IRAB. So that's the next 2 days for us. So with that, Mark.
Council Chair, if you don't have any further questions, we'll just thank you for your time.
We may have some questions. Councilor Anderson?
We've talked a lot about connecting other communities to our wastewater treatment facility. At this point in time, what's the capacity of our facility, and what is our future plans as far as, I've heard discussions all the way to maybe a smaller facility, maybe in the southeast end of the city or the county. Could you update us a little bit on that?
Certainly. Just in general terms, every day we treat about 15 million gallons of wastewater. Our current plant is permitted just at over 21 million gallons per day, so we have some growth. We have also some peaking that happens in that as well. We are just finishing the study for the second plant that would be on the east side that you talked about. And it is in the general vicinity of that large pump station near 57th Street and the Big Sioux River. HDR actually did that siting plan for us. They maintain our dynamic model, and so and essentially what that means is as growth progresses, there is a force main that today, as that wastewater comes to that large pump station, there's a force main that will only take about 3.5 million gallons per day back to the plant. Above that, we'll need to have a new plant out on the east side of town. And that's just as growth progresses, we wanted to make sure that we had the footprint, we procure the land, and also do the preliminary design so we can be ahead of that growth when it happens. But you're right, there's also some things that we can do to the existing plant to increase that capacity, which we recently, about 2 years ago, we did write a master plan that allows us to look at where some of the bottlenecks in the plant are, how we take those out. We took a major one out 2 years ago by investing about $2 million into one of the key pump stations right in the plant. So we're working on both sides, but we have opportunities for both, to build a new plant, but also to expand our existing when growth demands it.
And one other question just to go with that. As we grow and growth demands that second facility, are we going to allow our other partner communities to work with us to pay for that facility also?
Yes, and I would assume Tom would classify that as a regional facility, and so there would be, and that's part of that methodology to make sure that the expenses follow the respective assets.
Thank you.
Mark, one question. I think I remember from the previous presentation that I think it's 2015 when the city will have some of its major infrastructure in place, rebuilding over the next few years, the sewer system, main sewer lines, and others. I was just, hate to even bring it up, but the idea that we need to probably reestablish some confidence within our own system to manage our own before we go out and start looking for new customers, if you know what I mean. And I think it was 2015. Was that the year that most of those main sewer lines would be up to date? Or green, I think I remember was a kind of a good...
Right, what we consider Tier 1 and Tier 2. We've looked out 15 years, but clearly the central main will be done this summer, and then behind the Tuttle lift station, all the way up into that area by Meadows on the river will be updated in just the near-term years to come. And then we will selectively continue to use those flow monitors to find out what areas in the city are above what should be base flow, and then we go up into that basin and address whatever the issue might be. But I also certainly don't want us to lose recognition that it was an extremely wet year. The system was taxed hard, and but certainly predicates us investing into the system in 11.
And the timeline overall for this regionalization process would be what? As far as, I know there's more study that needs to be done, but just can you help me with that?
Oh, sure. We expect, and as the draft documents are coming to us for review, then we want to make sure then once we believe they're ready for a formal recommendation of the City Council, we bring them forward to you. And quite honestly, Harrisburg is the current one that we just worked with, and they're getting their pumping station and their force main in place to pump wastewater to Sioux Falls. But it could be 3 years until the next community, or it could be 10 years. I think the key is as they see growth, they should be able to take our policies in their facility plan to the DNR and say, here's alternate one, expand our lagoons and add a package treatment facility, or pump wastewater to Sioux Falls and eliminate and sell our lagoons, or maintain our lagoons for equalization. They'll be able to list another alternative to them and what makes financial sense. I think one of the key things that we always look at is capacity is one thing, but the EPA continues to put additional regulations on the quality of the wastewater that gets discharged to these streams. And so I think one of our conversations that we want to make sure that we stay close with these regional communities is they may have capacity, their lagoons may still have capacity short term, but if regulations change, that requires a much higher grade of effluent that goes to the receiving streams, then they would have Plan B to look at with the City of Sioux Falls. And it was one of those discussions that we talked about with Met Council when that group up there back in the 60s, I believe, were formed to come together. They had almost 40 plants, and now today they have 7. So when a new regulation comes on, they add on or adjust operations at 7 plants as opposed to over 40 up there. So it's economy of scale. It's a much better way to use your dollars.
So really the plan is just to do it as soon as we can because we don't need another incident like Harrisburg to catch us off guard. And if any other community is growing, they know what we're doing and
Right.
they can plan.
Well, and I think, too, just to clarify that the Harrisburg Agreement still has a multiplier in it. And the expectation is once these financial rate policies are set and this buy-in piece, which is the system development charges, are set, then they can work toward getting into this financial piece and getting away from the multiplier factor. So that multiplier of 1.25 that escalates up to 2.0, the expectation from their standpoint, too, is that goes away and they become, they set their rates based on these guidance policies that Tom will develop.
Councilor Brown.
Mark, the most important question is, how long before you take that diagram and complicate that even more for us?
Well, we're working on that internally.
You can just see you were ready to make that more complex for us.
I appreciate that. Well, with that, thank you very much. And as things progress, we'll start to bring some actual draft documents in front of you for review.
Great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom and John, for your presentation as well. Anything else for the council? Sue Aguilar has become isolated in her...
She's offended all the other councilors,
she is,
apparently.
oh, all right. Well, then if we don't have anything, we'll call this meeting adjourned.